Hello everybody, my name is Kat and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror. And today we are diving into 28 years later, The Bone Temple. I apologize if my voice sounds weird. I am currently recovering from a cold, and while I feel fine, my voice is still not quite there yet. So I apologize if my voice sounds a little gravelly and a little nasally as we go through this review. But I will say right off the bat here that I loved this movie. I loved it so much more than I thought I was going to. Just some quick context, I love the first 28 Days Later. I think that film is a horror masterpiece. I did a whole video breaking down why I think that film still works so well today. Shameless plug, I'll leave a link for it somewhere around here. And as far as the first 28 Years Later film goes, I know some people really didn't like it. I wasn't so much in that camp. Overall, I did enjoy the film, but there were some directing choices on Danny Boyle's part that I found to be a bit jarring. There were parts of that film that had a much more experimental vibe, and I think that pulled me out of certain points of the film. And there was just a lot going on in that movie, and it really takes something like The Bone Temple that does feel more streamlined and more cohesive in its directing. Now, having the context of this second film, you can really see how much work the first film had to do in terms of building out the overall themes of this trilogy, in terms of the world building, setting up the characters. So in retrospect, I can appreciate the first film more. However, I do feel like I liked The Bone Temple more than the first film, and I do think that is because Nia DaCosta is coming in as a director, and as I said, her work is not as chaotic, it is not as experimental. Some of the more like oddly goofy moments of the first film, like the whole thing with the Jimmies showing up at the end, I know that was jarring for a lot of people, myself included. Like when they show up and that Teletubby music is starting, I was like, what is going on here? But I'm happy to say that that is not what happens in this film. While the Jimmies do play a large role, they're much more menacing, still obsessed with the Teletubbies, but in a much more darkly humorous, kind of creepy way. I was also obsessed with the Teletubbies as a 2-year-old. I'm pretty sure I had like one of the plushies, and it is just hilarious to me the way that they are being included in this franchise. Like, I never would have saw that coming. There is so much in this new trilogy that I was not expecting at all. Like, it continues to baffle me and surprise me in both very delightful and very confusing ways. And the fact that it keeps me on my toes so much is, I think, a big reason why I'm really falling in love with this new trilogy, even though it is completely different from the first 28 Days Later. If you are someone that did not like 28 Years because it did not have that gritty, camcordy feel of the very first film, you're not going to get that here either. Like, they are really putting the stake in the ground that this trilogy is its own separate things, even though we are now starting to get more callbacks from that very first film. I think this film is much more focused on the characters and the character development. You do get stuff with the rage monsters here and there. There is still plenty of gore throughout the film, but that's not the main focus. I could see how maybe someone could come into this and find it a little boring just because it is so much more focused on the characters. We also get fewer locations here. Like, it feels much more contained compared to the first 28 Years Later. And in that respect, that's where it feels more like 28 Days, in that you only have a handful of characters that you're following. And you do have that classic light versus dark theme that we see set up in the first 28 Days Later. A lot of thematic points around humanity, around empathy. To me, the rage monsters in this franchise have always represented the worst of humanity. Anger and violence and hatred and fear, which is really the baseline of all of these other emotions. And what this franchise has shown is that you don't necessarily need to be bitten by a monster to catch this infection in terms of fear and anger and othering other people and just assuming the worst of other people. You can still catch the effects of the rage virus just by leaning into these very negative human emotions. It also shows the very human ways that people get to these places, the trauma that's inflicted, the fear of being alone. I think this is a common theme that we see with a lot of the human villains in this franchise, is that they're very lonely people.
We fight off the infected, or we wait until they starve to death, and then what? What do 9 men do except wait to die themselves?
And so while there's a tendency for humans to act this way, there's also a tendency to lean more into connection and love and finding joy with other people. That's a big theme in the relationships of 28 Days Later. You see it here with Ralph Fiennes' character, and that you have Dr. Kelson, who is very much trying to figure out a potential cure for this virus, coming at these monsters not as creatures that need to be destroyed, but coming at them with the sense of empathy and trying to understand them. And for me, this just led to very beautiful moments of humanity, which sounds kind of cheesy as I'm saying it. Again, just these very like pure, peaceful moments with Ralph Fiennes that feels very different than what you get with the Jimmy characters, which are just complete chaos and rage and killing everything in sight. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older. I don't know if it's just because as someone that lives in the United States, like turn on any news cycle and all you're gonna get is stories of chaos and violence and hatred. I don't know, but I feel like I'm really leaning more towards these stories that do offer these moments of hope for humanity and do offer moments of joy and do offer moments that show the best parts about being human, which is being able to feel love for another person, which is being able to have connection and empathy. And I think it's also really interesting that they're posing this question with the virus of when it infects you, is it really something that changes your whole mind and biology? Or is it maybe just this filter that has gone over your mind and there's a way to break through that? And that very much feels like an Alex Garland commentary on society. This idea that people get attached to certain ideologies or certain ways of thinking, and how these ideologies that I think can act like a mind virus can create fear and distrust in people that might have different beliefs or values. And so what I think is interesting is this idea of the mind virus as that's not a part of the essence of being a human being. The essence of being a human being is this idea of connection and love. This is a theme that I think was set up in the first 28 years later, this idea of misinformation and the ways that societies and cultures that go through traumatic events create their own stories in their minds to deal with what has happened. And we see this throughout the characters. First film, we see it with Spike and his family and the people on that island that they live at. They have a whole idea of the world. You have the Jimmies who have their own belief system going on. So this is a very clear theme throughout the series, and one that feels very much a response to how we've seen culture and media and ideologies morphing, especially in a post-pandemic world. And then as far as the characters go, like the real stars here are Ralph Fiennes and Jack O'Connell. These two are having so much fun in their roles, and you can just feel that coming off the screen is very palpable. Between this and Sinners, Jack O'Connell is really becoming this great horror villain icon, and he's very good at playing these characters where when you see them approaching, you're just like, oh man, this guy is bad news. But he also has just this like swagger and charm. There's a seductive quality to him that I think all great movie villains have. But overall, when I think about this movie, like the one word that keeps coming to mind is joyous, which feels very strange because there is still moments of extreme violence and gore here, but I had such a good time with the film. There's a playfulness to it. There's a dark humor to it that you do very much see in 28 Days Later as well. And I think that really enhances these themes of humanity that the film is talking about. And I thought Nia DaCosta did a really great job of showing us these distinctions between Ralph Fiennes' character and his much more peaceful world versus the very chaotic world of the Jimmies. And then what happens when these two worlds eventually meet. I'm going to get more into spoilers now for the rest of the video. I would say if you're on the fence about this film because you didn't really like 28 Years Later, I would say give this one a shot. Personally, I'm looking forward to seeing this film again. And I did not feel that way about the first 28 Years Later. Okay, so just quickly to touch on some spoilers, I did want to also shout out the camera work and the cinematography of this movie, which I thought was gorgeous throughout. There's one shot that stuck in my mind, which actually happened at the very beginning of the film. It's where Spike is first introduced to the Jimmies, and Lord Sir Jimmy Crystal is telling him that he has to fight one of the other Jimmies if he wants to be a part of their gang. So you have that whole fighting scene happen, and Spike kills one of the Jimmies. And there's just this shot afterwards where Sir Jimmy Crystal walks over to the dead body of the other Jimmy, and you can just see his shadow that's overlaid with this guy's dead body. I love shots like that visually highlight these themes of the film and the characters as well. And I felt like that really highlighted just this whole relationship with this group of characters that are the Jimmies. And the fact that you have this one guy whose beliefs have, again, infected this group of people around him, and how this group of people have really molded their own personalities and identities to match this supposed leader that they are following. And so I think that also just like touches on, again, these overall themes that we're seeing in this franchise around around hive mind mentality in a way. This might be me reading too much into it, but I just love shots like that. Like, I feel like that shadow shot was a really great visual way of just showing the power that Sir Jimmy Crystal has over the rest of the group. I was like, yes, this is what we come to the cinema for. I also really enjoyed the stuff with Samson, which I didn't think I was going to. And I was surprised at how invested I actually got in his storyline of him recovering from the rage virus. I love the moment when he was on the train and he's having the memories. He's going in and out of these memories and he comes out of it saying, I don't have a ticket. Like, to me, that just felt like a very, again, human response. Is this the first film where we have actually seen someone recover from being infected by a zombie-like virus? I mean, the only thing that's coming to mind is something like Contagion from Soderbergh, but that wasn't a zombie movie. I know books like World War Z talk about life after the zombie apocalypse. I don't know, is this the first time that we've seen someone actually recover from a zombie virus in a movie? And just to get to the ending of the film, I absolutely loved that crazy scene in the Bone Temple where Ralph Fiennes is on drugs and is acting like Satan and starts blasting Iron Maiden from his record player and is dancing and putting on a show for the Jimmies. As of right now, we're still only in the first part of the year, but for right now, that holds the #1 spot as the most fun that I've had in a movie and a theater experience. When the promotional materials for this film started coming out and you saw that poster, when I first saw that poster, I was like, what in the world is going on here? Like, my brain didn't even register that that was Ralph Fiennes. I was like, is this some like crazy rando that just shows up out of nowhere? Like, I don't know what's happening. But no, now in the context of it, it was a pretty great badass scene. And then the ending with Cillian Murphy, we finally get Jim back after all this time. And again, just ending on that moment of hope where they see Spike and Jimmy Inc. running from the rage monsters and his daughter asks him, like, are we gonna help? And he says, of course we are. And again, it was just like the moment in the theater where I was like, yeah! And then the original theme from the first film starts playing and yeah, that tugged at my heartstrings. Such a great setup for the finale. We are going to end where we begin, and you know, we love a good bookend on this channel. I do feel like it kind of dampers that ending of hope that 28 Days Later had, because 28 Days Later ends with a suggestion that maybe Jim and everyone else gets rescued, but obviously not. So my question going to the third film is like, what happened there? If I had to give one critique, I think it would be that we don't really get much of Spike. We don't really get much of his character development. The first film is very much this coming of age story for this character. A kid who has grown up in this community, has grown up believing certain things about the world and about his family. And then it's that classic journey where he has to grow up and realize that maybe some of the things that people were telling him, especially his father, are not true, and that there is a whole other world out there that he is not familiar with. Very much a classic hero's journey in that first film. Here, he spends a lot of time, I feel, crying and sniveling in the corner, which is obviously understandable being with the Jimmies and their psychotic tendencies. But this film feels like it more belongs to Dr. Kelson and Jimmy Crystal than it does to Spike, which in itself isn't a bad thing because, as I said, I think those two characters really shine here. You don't really think about Spike, which might not be the best thing if Spike is supposed to be your primary protagonist throughout all three films. I did like his relationship with Jimmy Inc. I thought that was nicely done. But I guess I just wish that we had gotten a little bit more with Spike in terms of his psychology, because we don't get anything with the island in this film at all. I'm assuming it's going to come back for the third film, because the first film, we leave it where Spike has the argument with his dad. There's a broken relationship there. Spike runs away. It feels like the third film would naturally conclude that piece of the story. That feels like a very large narrative thread to just leave hanging. And there is a moment that we get in this film with Jimmy Crystal where he's talking about the trauma that he had as a kid and the whole thing with his dad in the church and the dad encouraging the rage monsters to be killing everyone. You can see how what happened with his father impacted him, how that led him down this path of extreme violence, and also trying to create this narrative inside his head to try to understand his father's motivation. And so I thought, like, within that, maybe there was something for Spike to also be reflective of his relationship with his father. Again, I'm not sure how they would have done it, but it feels like that would have been a natural way to bring back Spike's history into this film. I'm guessing maybe in the third film we'll get more of that with Spike and Cillian Murphy's character. So I'm excited to see where this trilogy goes. I'm actually really looking forward to the last film. I know that they filmed these first two films back to back. I don't think the third film has been filmed yet. I don't even think we know who the director of the next film is going to be. I think there's a assumption that Danny Boyle is going to come back for the last one. I saw a Reddit AMA with Nia DaCosta where she said that she's not going to have any involvement in terms of directing the third film. I mean, I wouldn't mind her coming back to direct the third film. I thought she did a great job with this one. I also wouldn't mind seeing Alex Garland taking the reins and directing the last one. I think that would be really interesting too. Could you imagine if we get the third film in this franchise and it's just like the same tone and vibe of Men? Did you see the film this weekend? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.